Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Kamma daf tet. This is the daf for Shabbat. This week's learning is sponsored by my parents, Paul and Robert Cohen, in loving memory of my grandmother, Sonia Washit, Sarah Bat Yitzchak Zichronah Livracha, whose yurtzeit is today. A woman who taught me about resilience. She was a role model for me, and particularly now as we face challenges during these very difficult times. Today's daf is sponsored by Marion Werner, in loving memory of Dova Bat Yichya. We're going to get started with Abaye. Abaye makes a statement at the very bottom of Chet Amud Bet. We were talking about land that someone might sell with or without achrayut. We talked about that in the previous daf. That's selling land with responsibility. So if there's a lien on the property and you sell it with responsibility, if the property gets collected for a loan, then basically the person who bought it will get their money back. So now Amar Abaye, Reuven shemachar sadeh l'Shimon shelo ba'achrayut. In this case, Reuven sells a field to Shimon without achrayut. And why would Shimon buy a field without achrayut? Well, perhaps he's getting a good deal on it, right? It happened to me once. We went on flights, and in order to get cheaper flights, we took two flights that were not connected to each other. They weren't linked. And the travel agent said, just know that they're not linked and you might be getting a good deal on this, but if you end up with a problem, the other airline's not going to basically help you at all. And in fact, of course, what happened was Murphy's Law, the first flight was canceled or the things were changed. I don't remember all the details, but something got messed up with the first flight and it then messed up the second flight, and we were messed up because right here it is, you buy something for a good deal, but in the end, sometimes you pay the price. So in this case, same thing is going to happen here. Reuven sold this field to Shimon without any responsibilities. Now, yatzu aleha asikim. Now, the assumption is in both these situations that we're going to describe, Shimon hasn't paid the money yet. And all of a sudden, people start claiming that the land that Shimon's buying from Reuven is really theirs. Okay, what exactly is the nature of this complaint? There's a big debate, and they don't seem to have proof or witnesses. Otherwise, that would be a different story. But they start claiming that they have rights to this land. So obviously, Shimon wants to get out of this deal ASAP, and he hasn't yet paid the money, so perhaps he can. Well, it depends. Land is acquired in a bunch of different ways. One of them is chazaka, by doing something on the land. Today we'll get to a particular example of what could chazaka be. So if Shimon hasn't yet laid any stake to the property and started doing something in the property, then yachol lachzor bo. And again, he hasn't yet paid the money, so he could change his mind. If you pay the money, also that's a way you acquire land through money, so the deal would be sealed. But if he hasn't yet acquired the land in any way, then he can change his mind. But even though they made an agreement, and we saw yesterday this issue of ta'aromet, a complaint. So, right, there'll be no complaint in this case. It's fine. Reuven can't say, it's unfair you're doing this because there's an issue here. Now, again, it's not clear there's an issue, but it's enough to say thanks, but no thanks. But once he already does a chazaka in the land, which again, we'll see what this is soon, he can't change his mind. My time. Reuven could say to him, listen, you got a bag that was tied up, meaning you didn't look what was inside. It was your fault. Why'd you buy a bag without looking what's inside, right? You should have checked that I didn't have a lien on the property, right? That's your job when you're going to buy land, to check everything out. If you didn't check it out, that's your problem. Okay, it's like buying a bag that's tied and you accepted it without knowing what was inside the bag. That's your problem. So now they say, at what point is there going to be a chazaka? By the way, there's a study guide for today that will help you. So you can use the study guide to help you with the flow here. From when is there chazaka michidayish ametzrin? Okay, again, there's some different interpretations, but when you start delineating the borders, okay, when you start doing something on the border of the field, that's an indication that you're living there. And then it's too late for you to change your mind about it. V'davka shelo ba'achariyut. Now notice this means, it was specifically said because you didn't buy it with responsibility. But if you bought it with responsibility, or I should say a guarantee, then no. You could change your mind, even if no. Here, again, what does it mean? It means, now if you bought it b'achrayut, well, Reuven would have to pay you back the money anyway. But the point is that's a pain. You have to go to court and start arguing with him. In this case, if there's some sort of concern with the land and you haven't yet paid the money, but you did a chazaka, you can still change your mind because you haven't paid the money yet. Okay, and then you can say, listen, I'm not giving you the money, I'm giving you back your land. Some people say no. Even if you bought it b'achrayut, once you did a chazaka, it's too late. Shimon can't go back and say, I don't want this land. Why? Because Reuven could say, basically, you already did a chazaka on the land. The land is yours. You want to claim, I don't want this land because maybe it really wasn't Reuven's and then someone's going to come take it away from me. Well, if you bought it b'achrayut, Reuven could say, you don't get to give me my land back and take your money back, or never pay me the money. You already did a chazaka, you accepted it. And it's b'achrayut, so what do you care? I'll give you the money back. In other words, but I'm only going to give you the money back if you, what does it say? Ach ve'tirpach. Go show me the deed. Go show me that the land's not really mine. And when you prove that in court, then yeah, I'll give you your money back. But, and that is again, before a chazaka, it doesn't make a difference. You can obviously change your mind. But once it's a chazaka, you can't change your mind, even b'achrayut. So there's a machloket about whether this is only if there wasn't achrayut, or even if there's achrayut, two opinions whether you could actually change your mind, even though you did chazaka, as long as you didn't pay the money, and then you just don't give the money, and get the land, or no, you have to give the money because you already did a chazaka and acquired the land. You have to pay the money, and if you want to get it back, well, go to court and see who wins in court. Rav Huna Amar. Now we're going back to this contradiction. We're going back to, this contradiction we had before about kesef and metav. Okay, one pasuk said kesef and one pasuk said metav, and now we're going to go back and have we had a resolution to this contradiction before in Daf Zayin, and now we're going to have another resolution to the contradiction. Just 1 second. Check one thing. Second. There was metav and there's this, it was whether you have to pay metav to the beitin, tashlumei kesef, shvei kesef, hafilu subin. There was this two different sources. One seemed to say that you could pay food, even bad food, and the other seemed to say that you could pay that you had to pay the best of your land. So Rav Huna Amar o kesef o metav. You can do either money or the best of your land. It could be either or. So now, Eitivei Rav Nachman le Rav Huna. So Rav Nachman comes and throws a question against Rav Huna. Yashiv lerabot shvei kesef va'afilu subin. So now they say, the word yashiv. Okay, let's just look at the pasuk again. Baal habor yishalem kesef yashiv lebaalav. Okay, money he will return. Why does it say yashiv he will return? It's to include even shvei kesef afilu subin. So he says, if Rav Huna says either kesef or metav, either money or the best of your land, well, it says you can even do subin, So this would seem to indicate that that it's not only money or land, it's even something that's valued money, and even if it's something not really very important. So how could Rav Huna say either kesef or land when it could be even shvei kesef? So they say, that source is only if you don't have. They say, what do you mean? If you don't have, isn't it obvious that you could pay with something else? What else are you supposed to pay them? They say, no. You might have thought, if I have this disgusting brand or not such pleasant brand, and you want to, let's say I want to pay you back with that, maybe I have to exchange it into money, go sell it in the shuk, take the money and give you the money. No, it seems if I have nothing else, then I could pay you the subin. But normally I really need to pay you in money or in the best of my land. Amar Rav Asi. Ksafin harein kekarka. Now Rav Asi is going to make this statement about money. Money is like land. So now the question is, lemai hilchata. What's he trying to say here? For what purpose? And what does this connect? Okay, we're going to give a few suggestions here. If what he's saying is instead of paying metav, you could pay money, Rav Huna. Well, that's Rav Huna. And then, okay, so what's wrong with Rav Asi saying the same thing as Rav Huna? Well, the Gemara should have introduced it as v'chein amar Rav Asi, and such Rav Asi said, because he's basically saying the same thing as the previous. So it must be he's saying something different. Otherwise, the Gemara would have connected that. So Ella, it must be talking about something not connected to our issue, but something else entirely. So it doesn't mean if you damage someone's property, you could pay either with money or with the best of the land. It is for the following case. There were two brothers that split up their property. One took land and one took money. Okay, so they took their father's stuff. One said, I'm taking land. The other one said, I'm taking the money. Let's say it's equally valued, but one is land, one is money. Now, comes one of the creditors of the father, and says, listen, your father owed me money, I'm taking it from the land. Now, the brother who took only land now loses his land. He goes to the other brother. He said, listen, he took the land. I'm taking half the money now, 50, right? Which is only fair. We should pay 50-50. And that's what it means, ksafim harehin kekarka, that the money can be used to replace the land in this case. And the one who took land has rights to demand money from the other brother. To which the Gemara says, pshita, this is obvious. What? Hai bara, v'hai lav bara, what? One is a brother and one is not really a brother? In other words, of course, they're brothers. They have to share what the father owed. Of course, they have to split it. What's even the question? Some people say, so that can't be the explanation. So we rejected explanation number one because we said it can't be because it's the same thing as Rav Huna, that it means either when you pay damages, you could pay land or money. Then we reject answer number two because it's obvious that if you have two brothers and one took land, one took money, then the one who they take away, creditor takes away the land, of course the other one has to give money. So some people say adraba, li'idach gisa. Some people say actually the opposite. Damar le lahachi shak le ksafim. Okay, so let's just start explaining. We're mid-sentence. But some people say that if one brother took money and one brother took land, and then the creditor came and took the land, he would have no rights to claim the money from the other brother. Why? Because he could say, the one who took money could say the following. I took money, I took a risk by taking the money. What was the risk? Someone could go steal it, right? It's not easy to steal property, but it's very easy to steal money. Now, I took the money knowing that there was a risk. Maybe someone will steal it. And that was my risk that I took. And if someone stole it from me, I wouldn't be able to demand it from you. And that's why you took land. Because if someone took that land, seized it, and for a loan our father had, well, you weren't going to be able to demand from me. In other words, we each took a risk. There was a risk in the money and there was a risk in the land. You ended up losing out. Sorry, but I don't have to give it to you. So therefore, in that case, it actually wouldn't be the case, right? This line then, okay, now before it didn't work because it was obvious that that was the case. Now it doesn't work because it's not even true. It's not either money or land. You can't take the money. You can't demand the money in place of the land that was seized. So another option. And I don't know if they're even relating that to this particular issue. They're just saying, by the way, just know there's another opinion here. Now, so here's another explanation. It's three brothers that split up land. I'm sorry, two brothers that split up land. Okay, so now it's two brothers that divided land, and the Baal Chov took one of them. And then the point is, they took one of the lands, and the other brother could give back either land or money. Now, to which they say, why would Rav Asi say this? But Rav Asi already said this once before. So again, we have two brothers. They divide up the land of the father, not land and money. They divide up the land. One property gets seized for the loan. The other brother can go to the other one and say, listen, give me back. Okay, now this could be explained in two ways, but let's start with either land or money. Okay, now, this, by the way, Rav Asi already said. So he would have no need to say this here because he said it somewhere else. Where is that? To Itmar. Because it was said, and we're going to have a three-way machloket here. Ha'achim shechalku ba'al chov v'natal chelko shel echad mehem. Rav amar batla machloket. It doesn't really mean machloket here. It means what's chalukah is to separate. The separation is canceled. Okay, so if me and my brother, let's just assume we inherit equally. Okay, even though by Jewish law it's really just brothers, but let's just assume me and my brother get land. We split it 50-50. His land gets taken away. So now, according to Rav, we basically put all whatever's left, whatever we inherited, we put back together and redivide it. Whatever division we did goes back to the way it was. Okay, and then we just split it 50-50, whatever's left, whatever there is right now. Shmuel Amar Vite. We're going to explain this a little better, each opinion in 1 minute. Shmuel says, my brother lost. Too bad. Okay, he got unlucky and it's gone. Rav Asi Amar Notel Revia Bakarka Urevia Bama. Okay, now there's two different ways to read this. Let's go with one first. Rav Asi says you get either a quarter of, okay, I will get, if someone took the lamb from my brother, then I will, whatever is left, right? I now have half, and he took half. His half was taken away. So he gets to take either a quarter of my property in land or a quarter of it in money. Okay, now, why a quarter? We'll get to this. So let's read inside. Okay, some people say he actually gets half. He gets half in money and half in land. There's two different ways to understand this. And then, by the way, that would match, we go with the first interpretation, it works a little better, that you can either pay in money or in land. Otherwise, you'd have to say that what it meant before was that ksafim harein kekarka, that you would take money and land. Okay, it's a little bit more difficult according to that reading. Anyway, let's read inside and we'll understand better now. Rab Amar batla machloket kasaval achim shachaku kiyorshim havu. This is a big machloket in general. When we divide our property of our fathers, are we considered like heirs? Meaning, it's always really considered the estate of the father. And that way, if someone does claim part of it, then obviously it's going to go back to what it was originally. Because, yeah, I live in this property and you live in that property, but in the end, it's really all our father's property. So when the father's property gets taken, then, and it happened to be, was it my brother's possession, we're going to now split whatever's left. We're going to kind of put it back in the pool because it's all really our father's estate and split it up again. Shmuel Amar Vitel Kasavar Hachim Shchaku Lekuchot U Kilokach Shelo B'Achrayut Ami says something fascinating. So when we split up the land, it's as if I purchased my share from you and you purchased your share from me. Okay, so as if I bought land now, and not only is it that I bought land, but I bought it without any responsibility. That's how we divide up land according to Shmuel. Since I bought it without responsibility, or you bought it without responsibility, my brother bought it without responsibility. When it's taken from my brother, he has no claim on me. So he just loses out. And Rav Asi Amar Notel Revia Bakarka or Revia Bamo. Now, why would you do this? So let's go with, he only gets a quarter of my property. Now, why is that? Because we're not sure if they're Yorshim or if they're Lekucha. So now, right, he's not sure Rav or Shmuel. Now, Rav says you get 50%. My brother will get 50%. Shmuel says my brother will get nothing. So 50-50, what do we do? This is what we call mamon and mutabas afek. We don't know what to do with this money. We split it 50-50. So if Rav was right, then my brother would get 50%. If Shmuel was right, my brother would get nothing. So since it's in the middle, we do a quarter. And then Hilkach notel Ravia Bakar or Ravia Bamo. Now, he could take it in land. It's the land anyway. It was his originally, right? So we're going to give it to him in land. Or he could take it in money. Why could he take it in money? Because theoretically, if, let's say, it was be'achrayut, right? Someone sees the property from him, and then, right, it's kind of worth money because the person could have just taken money from him. So therefore, my brother could just take money from me because it's all about this value of a loan that was outstanding that he lost out on. So, and when you, for example, if something gets taken and you have be'achrayut, you have a guarantee on it, you can demand the money back, not necessarily, right? You can get the land or the money back. So anyway, it could be either in land or in money. And then the whole question is, money is like land, they're interchangeable here. And then Rav Asi already said this before, so why does he need to say it again? Because that's what he says here. Some people think it means that you actually get a quarter in land and a quarter in money, and he does get the 50%. And there's a whole explanation there why that is. Right. But by the way, Rashi proves, if you might remember this from Yavamot, there was these crazy cases in Yavamot where chalatz v'asaba ma'amar v'natan get. He did chalitza, then he did ma'amar, and then he gave a get. And they say the end is actually or. It doesn't mean end, it means or. And that's how Rashi explains. That's the explanation he prefers here, that it's either or, either a quarter in land or a quarter in money. The second explanation, if you look in Rashi, Lishna Achrina, in my book, it's right where the lines get wide. I don't know if it's the same as yours. Then you would say, right, you can get a quarter in land, you can get a quarter in money because they're all really the same. In the end, he actually gets half according to this, but you don't have to give him land. You could give him money as well. Okay. I don't want to get too into these two different options. Okay. I just want you to know that there's a machloket here about how to read it. Now we say, Elamai harehin kekarka. So now we're back to, we don't know then why we said ma'od harehin kekarka. Again, we started with option one was to say, if it's to say you get paid the meitav, either the meitav haaretz or money, well, that's the exact same thing as Rav Huna. If it's for these two brothers, right, we said either it's obvious, right, or it's actually not true, okay, which is the opposite explanation. Or we have this other case that maybe Rav Asi is saying about these two brothers, and specifically when the Baal Chov came and took, right, it wasn't land and money, it was one took land, one took money. That was the first option. Second option is they both took land, and then you could pay back either in money or in land or part and part, however you read that. But then Rav Asi said this in some other place. So we're back to square one. And what did they say? Literally square one, because now we're going to say, they go back to the first one and say, actually, it's for meitav. Now, well, then again, it's the same thing as Rav Huna. So why didn't it say, and thus said Rav Asi the same thing? Okay, well, this would have been a lot simpler to just start with this. This statement actually does relate to our sugya, which makes sense that the Gemara brought it up here. And it doesn't have anything to do with the sugya about the brothers inheriting, but it actually has to do with if you damage someone, you have to pay. You can pay either in money or in land. And he was actually saying the same thing as Rav Huna, and the Gemara really should have written it as, and thus said Rav Asi. Amar Ravi Zera Amar Rav Huna. B'mitzvah ad shlish. Okay, now we're getting into something else, which is when it comes to doing a mitzvah, what's called hidur mitzvah. You should do the mitzvah better, and you can add up to, or you should add up to, perhaps it's recommended, a third more. Or we don't know exactly what a third is, okay, until a third. So now, what does the Gemara say? My shlish, what does this mean? Turning now to Amabed. Ile ma shlish beito, if it means you should spend, okay, look at Rashi. Rashi says, Shachayav adam levazbeis b'mitzvat lulav, o tzitzit, o sefer Torah, shlish ma sheyesh lo. If it means you have to spend a third of the money that you own in the world, the Gemara asks a good question. If he gets 3 mitzvah, what he's supposed to spend a third on each one, even if you view it like half lives, maybe only a third of what he has then, but you're going to eventually just run out of money because you're going to spend all your money on mitzvah and you'll have nothing left. What it means is when you're doing a hidur mitzvah and you want to buy a nice lulav, you can spend up to a third more in order to do it nicer. By Rav Asi, shlish milagav or shlish milavav. Rav Asi asked an interesting question, which is hard for us to understand because we don't do math in this way. But in the times of the Gemara, they often did math in this way. Like for example, okay, and I'll explain it in a minute. So it means shlish from the outside or shlish, right? Oh, sorry, I should say shlish, a third from the inside or a third, that's milagav, or a third from the outside. Bar, like braita is outside, or a chaya, what do you say? A chai bar, right? A wild animal is a bar. So anyway, bar means wild, which was again outside. So now, do we count the shlish from the outside or from the inside? What does that mean? It means that when let's say it's worth 100. So if you say like an average lulav etrog is worth 100 shekels, okay, hopefully not $100. I don't know what prices are in America, but let's say an average one costs 100 shekels. So what do? You take 100 and you say you could pay a third more, a third from the inside, which is a third from the 100. So that's 33 more. So you'll pay 133 shekels for it. Or is it shlish milavar? Once you add another amount, then from the total, this is the weird one, it will be a third of the total. So what does that really mean? It means 50% more, which means you would pay another 50, and then you end up with 150. And what's a third of that? 50. So what we're saying is you can add 50 more, which ultimately will become a third of what it is in total now. This is actually, whenever we say chomesh, it's really a quarter, because it's let's say 100, and then normally you'd say a fifth would be 120, but it's actually 125. And then at that point, 25 is 1/5 of the total. I hope the math isn't too complicated. It's really not too complicated. Just think about it and you'll figure it out. So and often in the Torah or in the rabbinic law, they count it more the other way, not a third of 100, but a third of the 150 once you add it, which is actually 50%. To which the Gemara answers teku. We don't really know what the answer is to this question. Okay, the first third is from your own money, and you'll probably take a loss on that. But once you do more than a third, actually God is going to compensate you for this. Okay. And therefore you can, right, it's almost encouraging you to spend even more because you'll be compensated. Again, we don't know exactly how this works, but you'll basically be compensated for this. Okay. Why is this here? It's a really good question what this is doing here. Okay. So first of all, it's Rabbi Zera who says in the name of Rav Huna. So they say that since it's another case where Rav Huna was talking about parts. 1 second. Right. It could be also the earlier part. It's possible there's a different version. The Sefer Ayashar of Rabbanit is a different version of the text. It's Amar Rabbi Zera Amar Rav Huna, which is exactly how it appeared earlier. And then it would be more like, often when the Gemara has somebody saying something I don't know if I said it well. Here it's Amar Rav Zera Amar Rav Huna, and there it just said Rav Huna Amar. But it's possible that the earlier part was also Rav Zera in the name of Rav Huna, and then that would explain why this appears here. It's just some other statement that Rabbi Zera quoted Rav Huna as saying. Okay, now we're moving to a Mishnah, which is a pretty unclear Mishnah. We're going to have to spend the next while understanding it. Okay, we're going to start to understand parts of it today, but not finish. Okay, it's not exactly clear what this means. Rashi says, in a case where I was obligated to watch something, that means if I didn't watch it properly, then I caused the damage. Okay, this sounds a little bit like some sort of case where I didn't exactly cause the damage directly, but because I didn't watch it properly, somehow damage has happened. The Gemara is going to give their explanation as to what this is referring to. If I caused part of the damage, I was responsible for part of the damage. I actually could become obligated for all the damages. Let's say I was responsible for part of the damages, but actually there were more damages than just what I was technically responsible for. But what I did cause that, again, not exactly clear what we mean, then it's as if I caused all the damage. That means anything where there's no me'ilah, that means it's not hekdesh. Okay, hekdesh is really not owned by anybody. It's owned by the temple, but there's actually aren't damages. Damages are between humans and their fellow humans, but not the temple. So nechasim, which don't have me'ilah, you're responsible for it, right? Meaning anything that's not hekdesh. Nechasim shehem shel b'nei brit, you're liable for damages for other Jews. Okay, things are different if it's a Gentile. We're not going to get into that right this minute. Nechasim hamiyuchadim. Okay, what's that? Rashi says. Sorry, I'm just going. By the way, I should say this. When they learn laws of Me'ilah, it's because it says shor re'ehu, the shore of your friend. And re'ehu precludes, right, something that belongs to the temple. So nechasim hamiyuchadim means people who have objects that have owners as opposed to something which is ownerless. Okay, that's the way Rashi explains it. And again, we're going to see this in the Gemara later. I'm pointing out specifically Rashi explains this way because it's not so clear what this means without Rashi's explanation, which means it could be open to other interpretations as well. Rashi often uses the Gemara's explanations to influence the way he understands the Mishna. This word, these next words, uvechol makom and anywhere, is not, some people don't actually have this version and take those words out, but we'll read it anyway. And if the damage is anywhere, even though we know that sometimes it's not anywhere, it depends, like regel and shame, for example, in the public domain, you're not responsible. Chutz mireshut hamiyuchedet lemazik. Okay, if someone brings something into my house and then I damage it, well, it's their fault. They brought it into my house. Ureshut hanizak ve'hamazik. If it's shared property between us, also I'm not responsible. And when they damage, and when they damage, this might remind you of the first Mishna. The end of the first Mishna said the same thing. When they damage, right, you're obligated to pay from Meitav Haaretz. Same thing here. That's why, okay, I actually made a mistake. I was confused when I taught it the first time, and now I realize why. If you remember, we learned a special law from the fact that it repeats. We said this comes to include an additional case. There was a bit of a debate what case it was. And then, right, which type of damage did it include that wasn't mentioned in the Mishnah? It's actually, I thought it was from the first Mishnah because it was the same language as the first Mishnah, but it's really from this Mishnah. It's from here because the first time it needed to be said for its own sake. The second time it says that it's unnecessary and therefore it's going to come to include something additional. And that was actually what we were talking about there. Okay, so now I'm correcting myself. Okay, the last time we said this was additional, it was actually not the first Mishnah, it was from this Mishnah. Tanu Rabbanan. So later we'll get back also. The Gemara is going to say this is unnecessary. We already said you have to pay damages from the best of your land. So why does it say? Tanu Rabbanan. Now we're going to have a braita, which actually brings the same line as the first line and tries to say, what is this talking about? Kol shechavti b'shmirato ichsharti et nisko. Ketzad. Okay, so what's a case where I became responsible to watch over it, and then I'm responsible for the damages, right? It's obviously not I watched something and something happened to it, because that would just be a regular case. This is obviously adding something different. Ketzad. Shul v'bol shemasran l'cheresh shoteh v'katan v'yiziku. I took my shul, okay, my ox, my animal, or a boar, and I put it in the responsibility of someone who doesn't have enough knowledge to know how to protect it right. Okay, someone who's deaf, which again usually means in this kind of context a deaf mute, a shoteh, someone whose mental capabilities are not there, or weak, a katan, a minor, vihiziku, and they damaged. Okay, so now the shore boar that I gave to someone who's not capable of properly watching it, and then they did the shore and the boar damaged someone, or something, chayav l'shalem. Then we're obligated to pay. But masha ein came be'esh, according to this braita, this is true for shore or boar. It's not true for fire. So now we're going to have to figure out, what are we talking about here? What would be a case where we have a parallel between a shore or boar case that's parallel to a fire case, that I gave it to someone who's not responsible, it then caused damage, and I would be liable if it was shore or boar. I wouldn't be liable if it was fire. So we're going to have a bunch of different possibilities. If I tied up the animal and I covered the boar, the pit, and what would be a similar case? I gave them a gachelet. What happens to a gachelet? Now, a shore that's tied up and a boar that's covered really shouldn't cause damage. So, let's see. Okay, so we're assuming I'm not really so responsible for that, but we're going to say, again, we have to find a case where I will be responsible if it's a shore, or a boar, I won't be responsible if it's a person. Right? We could say a shore kashur, well, the shore could untie himself, the boar could get uncovered, so we'll see. But what's the comparison by Aish, where we're going to say that there you wouldn't be responsible? A gachelet. Now, what's a gachelet? I give you a coal. Now, a coal generally is going to cool down as it goes on. And only if you fan it is it going to actually get hotter. So if you fan the coals, well, then if the cheresh shoter katan fan the coals, then I won't be responsible. But if it's a gachelet, okay, so now they're going to say, Mishna, we'll get to the fanning, but right now we're just assuming I gave them a gachelet. So right now they say, Mishna hacha or Mishna hacha. Why would, right, theoretically, all should be exempt, because you gave them something that really wasn't so dangerous and nothing really should have happened. The animal was tied up, the boar was covered, and the coal was just a coal, and it, was not so hot, and it was basically going to get cooler as it goes on. Shouldn't have really turned into a big fire. So that doesn't work. Because again, we have to find that shore and boar you'll be responsible for it and not for the fire. Let's say the shore was untied and the pit was uncovered, and you left it with someone who's not responsible to watch it, and then obviously you're going to be responsible. Well, what would be the comparison by Aish? And again, we're going to have to say, why wouldn't you be responsible by the fire? Well, the kavateka be'esh shall have it. It would be you gave them a flame, like a lit flame, which is actually very dangerous. So mashain came be'esh to patul. Wait, you can't possibly say that you'll be exempt if it's fire, because Ha'amarish Lakish Mishmei Dechizkia Lo Shanu Ela Shemasar Lo Gachelet Viliba Aval Shel Hevet Chayav. Okay, this is a different case. We have to kind of explain. Okay, there's a Mishna which says, Sholeach. I'm going to read it. Sholeach Havarat. Much later in the Masechet, I sent a fire b'yad cheresh shoteh v'katan, in the hands of someone, one of these people who doesn't have the capability to watch it. Patul midinei adam. I'm exempt from laws in a regular court. Okay, now, Rish Lakish said in the name of Chizkiah, what's it talking about? That I gave him a gachelet, a coal, and he fanned it. This is what I was talking about before. If he fans it himself, then I'm not responsible. But what's the obvious from here? Aval shalhevet. But if it was a shalhevet, I gave him a flame. Of course he'd be chayav. I'd be chayav because I gave it to him. So now, if you want to say that the shore and the boar were uncovered and loose, untied, and the fire, then the comparable case would be a shalhevet. Well, again, it doesn't fit in with what it says there. It says fire I'm not responsible for. Here I would be responsible if I give him a flame and he burns something, right? So my timer, daha bare hezeka. Because why is that you're going to be responsible in this case? Because with the fire, because it's clear you give a kid a torch, Of course, it's going to drop it on the floor. Who knows what's going to happen, but they're not going to be responsible and it will cause damage. So again, this doesn't really make sense. So now we go back to the one we suggested before that we rejected. It is that the shore was tied and the boar was covered. And it was a kachelet by the fire, which theoretically, we said before, theoretically you should be not liable for either of these. But again, you're going to have to say shore and boar, you are responsible, and fire, you're not. And if you say, well, what's the difference? Aren't you exempt for all these cases? Because you did what you were supposed to do. The animal was tied, the boar was covered, the fire was, not very strong. It was just a coal, right? Remember, it's like a lit coal, but it's kind of going out. So the answer, no, because sure, dark hilini tuke. Now this goes to something I mentioned at the beginning. The ox generally untie, right? An ox, if you tie an ox up, all they're going to try to do is try to get out of it. And a boar, dark hilini ture, a boar will end up getting uncovered. The covers, it's not like a sealed cover. It's a cover that could get moved off. It could move in the wind. Something could happen and it likely will get uncovered. And that's why you're going to be responsible for them, but not for the fire. Because the more you leave it, the more the coal gets cooler, and therefore it gets less dangerous as time goes on, whereas the shore and the boar get more dangerous. So now we figured out a way to understand this braita, which was really coming to explain our Mishna, that you gave it to a cheresh shoteva katan, and in the case of boar and shore, it was the boar was covered and the shore was tied. And when it comes to the fire was just a coal, but there's a difference because a shore and a boar, you can assume it might untie, and therefore it wasn't very smart to leave it with someone who can't watch it properly, and therefore you're liable. And the same thing with the covered pit. But when it comes to the fire, you're not really responsible because that kind of fire in a coal will just cool down and not really be dangerous. But that was all if you understand that Mishna that we read before, right? The Mishna of you give a cheresh shoteva katan, a flame, a fire, I should say, you're exempt, is talking about a coal and not a flame. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, Da'amar afilu masar lo shalhevet nami patul. Rabbi Yochanan says even if you give a shalhevet, you'll actually be exempt. If I gave a torch to a child, I'm not responsible. Well, then the kavatei hacha. So what would be the case? The comparable case here, bishor mutar bor meguleh. Now again, we're back to square one according to this explanation. And as we have an explanation according to Rish Lakish. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, you'd even be exempt for a flame. So now, if you compare the flame case where you're exempt to the case with a shore and a boar, what would you have? You're exempt for a flame. You're liable if you leave the shore free on the loose and you leave the boar opened. Now, now in both cases, theoretically, right, you're equally responsible, whether you give them a torch and they burn something, or you leave your animal untied and your boar uncovered and they don't watch it properly, you're responsible in either case. So to which they answer, Hatam tzavta decheresh kagarin. Hacha lo tzavta decheresh kagarin. Well, there is a difference because in the case of the shore and the boar, what does the child do? They just, right, they don't watch it properly, and the animal goes out and attacks, and the boar, someone falls into it. Well, really, the child had nothing to do with this, or the cheresh or the katan. They didn't have much to do with this. So basically, the responsibility is going to revert back to you. But if you give them a torch in your hand, what are they going to do? It's not going to do anything if they just stand there holding the torch. No damage will happen. It's only going to be damage if they throw the fire somewhere. So there's an action of the child or whoever it might be, that's the cheresh or katan, that they do an action which causes the damage. And that's why you're going to be exempt, because their action caused the damage, as opposed to in the first case, where it's just they didn't watch it properly, but really you didn't watch it properly by giving it to them to watch, right? That wasn't a very smart move, and therefore you're responsible. So that's in the end how they can explain it according to Rabbi Yochanan. So again, according to Rish Lakish, we explained it's about a protected shore. You basically, right, you tied it up, you protected the boar by covering it, but in the end, that's not the best method of protection. And that's why you're going to be responsible, because you didn't do a good enough job. Whereas the coal, it was pretty much protected giving it to this child. It was unlikely anything was really going to happen. Okay, because they can't really do too much with that. It's not really something that could damage very much. And that's the difference. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's leaving them on the loose and giving it to a kid. Well, of course, you're going to be responsible for that. But when it comes to a fire, not so much, because the child has an action in that. The child has to actually do something in order to cause the damage. And therefore, we're going to release you from responsibility for having given it to them. Now we're going to start a new braita here, which is going to relate to things we're doing, but it's basically comparing. Again, we're making comparisons between different cases. Tanu Rabbanan, chomer b'shol mi b'bor, and chomer b'bor mi b'shol. Okay, so we were comparing here Aish. Okay, in our case, Aish to shor and bor. Now we're going to compare shor and bor to each other. So there's a chumrah by shor, there isn't b'bor, and there's a chumrah by bor, there isn't b'shor. Chomer b'shor mi b'bor, sha'ashor m'shalem et ha'kofer. Okay, if a person dies, right, from your animal goring someone, then you have to ransom your way out. You're basically responsible. Remember, the Torah says you're really supposed to die, but instead you pay the value, right? You pay your way out of death. But in a bor, there isn't this payment of the kofir. Okay, you don't pay your way out. This is, by the way, if it's a shor mu'at, that the shor has to, the owner has to pay the kofir. V'chayat, or Rashi says, kofir b'mu'at shehimit ben cholim. Okay, now v'chayav b'shloshim shel eved. Okay, if a shor gores a slave, then you have to pay 30 shekels to the slave's owner. Nigmar dino asor bahana, another chumrah by shor, that once the shor becomes judged as a shor that killed somebody, well, the shor can't, it's called the shor niskal, and it's forbidden to benefit from. We've seen that a whole bunch of times in Seder Nashim already. Asor bahana, vidor kol elechu lazik. And another thing is that it's typical, right? The animal goes out and causes damages. Masha'ain came b'bor. Now a bor, right? Number one, you don't pay kofir. Number two, there's no 30 for the payment for the eved. The eved falls in. Once, you don't, the bor doesn't become forbidden to benefit from, and it doesn't move. So it's not like a shor that goes out and attacks. Chomer b'bor mi b'shor. What are the chumras of a bor over shor? Sha'bor tchilat asiyato l'nesek. We've seen this a number of times already. From the moment you create it, it's already prone to damaging. Umu'ad b'tchilato. It's a mu'ad from the beginning. Masha'en ke b'shor. Shor, right? You don't create, the shor isn't born as if it's ready to attack. And it's not mu'ad from the beginning. We assume it's not going to gore right away. So, right, only once you've warned him a number of times. So there you have the differences between them from this braita. We're going to continue in this braita in the next class, seeing other comparisons that this braita makes. Okay, so to review our daf, we started off with this case since we were talking about property with achrayut. So we finished up with another case about property with achrayut, actually property without achrayut. You didn't sell it with a guarantee, and you all of a sudden have some concern. Some people start claiming the land is theirs without any real proof. Can you change your mind or not, depending on the scenario? And what did it depend on, whether it was with guarantee or not with guarantee? Then we have Rav Huna who said, "Oh, kesef o metav," and then we tried to figure out what was he talking about. Is it relate to our issue or does it not? First, we thought maybe it doesn't relate to our issue. Then we said, no, actually it does. And then, sorry, I didn't say that right. Rav Huna definitely relates to our issue. Sorry, he's saying you could pay with money or the metav. The question was Rav Asi's statement, when he says the exact same thing, or he says something very similar, ksafim harehin kikarka, money is like land. Is he talking like Rav Huna, which originally we thought maybe not? In the end, we say, no, he really was. And it should have just said, and thus said Rav Asi. But in suggesting maybe that wasn't what it said, because it sounds like he was saying something different, then perhaps, right, we suggested that maybe this has to do with a bunch of different possibilities of cases of brothers splitting up. Either one got land and one got money, or maybe they both got land and then someone took the property away. Can one brother, right, from one brother claim from the other one to get it back or not? Can he claim it with money or with land? Right, that's possibly what we thought it was, but in the end, they reject all that and they come to the conclusion that it must be really what Rav Huna said before. Then we brought this other statement of Rabbi Zera in the name of Rav Huna about mitzvah, how much you can add to mitzvot. So we talked about that again, totally not connected, really. Just seems to be another statement Rav Huna said, and maybe another statement Rabbi Zera said in the name of Rav Huna, if you change the girsa in the beginning. Then we had this Mishna, which wasn't so clear. Again, we'll just review the first part of the Mishna that we delved into rather than the whole rest of the Mishna, which we'll deal with in the next, the upcoming daf. But we had this statement about if I became responsible for something, then I basically caused the damage to happen. And then we took a braita that said basically this is in shor and bor, and it's talking about when you passed it on to a cheresho terakatan, and they damage with it. you're responsible if it's shore or bore, you're not responsible for fire. And then we had to figure out why exactly, in what case are we talking about. We have one explanation according to Rish Lakish and a different one according to Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, and then we just ended with the beginning of this braita of comparing what's a chumrah of shore that isn't in bore and what's a chumrah of bore that isn't in shore. And we'll continue along this braita in the next class. Wishing everybody a Shabbat Shalom and hopefully a calm weekend.